Roth conversions are so popular right now. And the most common question that I get from those in retirement or about to retire is, should I be doing them? But like I've talked about in previous videos, if you do them incorrectly, you could really overpay in taxes. So how do we figure out if you're a good candidate for a conversion? Hi, my name's Chris Sabolsky, and I help people like you retire with dignity, purpose, and your eyes set on the future. So in this video, let's drill down to figure out the 6 questions that we have to ask ourselves to see if this conversion makes sense or if we're just throwing money away. So let's hop into it. Question 1, are you in a lower tax bracket now than you expect to be in the future? Well, this is really the core math behind a conversion. If you're in a lower tax bracket now than you expect to be in the future, then it might make sense to pay taxes now at a discount and then lock in tax-free growth for the future. For example, maybe you were recently retired, you're not yet taking required minimum distributions or Social Security, or maybe your income's temporarily low because of a job transition. This is a great opportunity to start conversions, especially if you can stay in that 12 or 22% tax bracket. But what if you're unsure? Well, this is a part that gets a little tricky. A lot of people assume that they'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement, but that's not always the case. So to figure out this question, you have to ask yourself, how much will I spend in retirement? What is my budget, right? What are my goals? And on top of that, you have to ask yourself about your later years in retirement. So question, what if I do a conversion and my required minimum distributions get prohibitively large? Would it make sense to convert now so that my RMDs are lower in the future and therefore I'm not paying as much taxes? So on top of that, higher RMDs could also increase your Social Security that's taxed. Instead of, say, it being taxed or 50% of it being taxed, your Social Security could be taxed as high as 85% of it being taxed. So also your RMDs, they could push you into higher IRMA thresholds for Medicare, meaning that you're paying higher premiums for a number of years for Medicare. So these are all things that you have to think about for reasons why you may want to convert sooner rather than later. Question 2, do you have room left in your current tax bracket? Now, let me show you the federal tax brackets here for a married filing jointly couple, and say you have 126K of taxable income, puts you in the 22% tax bracket. But you can see here that means you have 80K left over in this bracket before you jump up into the next bracket. Now, most people will say, hey, Chris, there's not much difference between, say, 22 and 24%. So why don't we just convert up to the top of the 24% bracket? And that can make sense, especially if you believe that these tax rates will be higher in the future and that 24%, is not going to be there. So if you believe that 24 is maybe going to become 27, 28, 29, 30, then it could make sense to convert at a higher bracket. So converting at a slightly higher bracket now with the fear that rates will increase in the future makes sense. So you're essentially locking up your money into a tax-free account, getting tax-free growth, and prepaying taxes at theoretically lower rates. But start the conversation with the question of, do you still have room in your current bracket? Before thinking about, political changes, legislative changes, tax changes, that's a lot to think about. Just start with where you are and how much room you have left in that bracket. So question number 3 is, are you collecting Social Security or not? So if you're already collecting Social Security, this is an extra taxable income you're getting, and a large Roth conversion could do more harm than good. In most cases, this is not an ideal time to convert large amounts, but what if you're not yet collecting Social Security? What if you're temporarily in a low income situation? Maybe you're retired, but haven't yet started claiming Social Security. Maybe you don't have to claim RMDs yet. You might have a few gap years in work, let's say. This can be where a Roth conversion makes the most sense. You may have the space to convert from your IRA and stay in a relatively low tax bracket and without pushing yourself over maybe a Medicare cliff. So Social Security questions really about whether or not you're collecting benefits. It's also about, do you have a flexible window where you can start doing a smart conversion? Question 4, are you trying to reduce your future required minimum distributions? Now, this is a big deal for Roth conversions and one that we've already talked about. And this specifically is for people with gigantic 401ks. So once you turn 73 or 75 for you younger folks listening, you're forced to start pulling money out of your traditional IRAs or 401ks, whether you need the income or not. And these required minimum distributions can grow very quickly. If you have a portfolio that performs well and your required minimum distribution percentages go up as you get older, you can be in a lot of trouble. So the required minimum distributions count as taxable income. And as that taxable income starts to increase, like we talked about before, it can trigger higher tax brackets, IRMA surcharges for Medicare, and Social Security becoming taxed more. So by doing Roth conversions before you take those RMDs, especially if you have gap years where your income is lower, this can help you bring that balance down and make it so that you don't have such high RMDs later. Now, question 5 is, do you plan to leave money to heirs in a higher tax bracket than you? This is where legacy planning meets tax planning. What if your heirs, whether it's your kids, grandkids, other beneficiaries, are in a higher tax bracket than you are? Now, it's very plausible, and this is where leaving them a Roth can be one of the best gifts you ever do. Why? Because a traditional IRA forces your heirs to pay tax on every single withdrawal. But a Roth passes that money to them completely income tax free. So think about it. When most people pass, let's say in their 70s or 80s, our children are 25, 30 years younger, that means that those kids are probably in the highest earning years of their life, and therefore their highest tax years. So if they inherit money in their highest tax years and have to pull money out and pay tax at that high level, well, it's a double whammy for them. However, if you pass that money in a Roth IRA, instead of them pulling the money out over a 10-year period, they'd probably wait until year 10 to pull that money out all at once. It'd be tax-free, and they've gotten 10 years of tax-free growth. So what a huge benefit that can be. But let's say your heirs are in a lower tax bracket than you, or you simply plan to spend down your savings. Well, at that point, the conversation really becomes more about your tax efficiency, not your heirs, right? The key thought for this is, how do you optimize taxes for both today and the next generation? Now, question 6 is, can you pay the tax from outside of these funds? This is one of the biggest factors that determines how much benefit you get from the conversion. When you move money from the traditional to the Roth, you have to pay taxes. That is a taxable event, right? So let's say you convert 100K within the 22% tax bracket. You owe 22K for taxes. Now, you could withhold the money in the conversion and pay the bill straight to the IRS, but instead of converting 100K, then you would only have converted 78 grand, right? 22K went to the IRS out of that 100K. So 78 went to the Roth. But if we have outside cash in, say, a taxable account or in our bank account to pay that tax bill, then the conversion becomes even more powerful. I once heard a financial planner say it's like buying out Uncle Sam. We've removed those dollars from the tax system. Now, there's a catch for those of us under 59 and a half. If you withhold money from your conversion, it counts as a distribution and is penalized. So if you withhold 22K from your conversion and are under 59 and a half, you could face a $2,200 tax penalty for an early distribution. So be careful. And if you have outside cash, then a Roth conversion can make a lot more sense. So at the end of the day, Roth conversions can make more sense depending on your specific situation. Now, when done right, they can reduce lifetime taxes, lower RMDs, and potentially help your next generation. So what are your thoughts on the Roth conversions? Are these important questions that you should ask yourself? Are there any other questions that I've missed? Leave a comment down below. And this is a newer channel, so please like, subscribe, and comment, and have a great day.